At the top, we have the TCL 5 series from 2021, the S546 model. At the bottom, we have the LG C1 2021. Obviously, these are both 55-inch televisions to make sure that the screen size is similar, and we're going to be comparing these. Now, at first, it might sound like a really unfair thing to do, but I promise you, the more this comparison goes on, the more you're going to kind of be shocked by the results. Okay, so looking at the top at the TCL first, we notice that there's a strong hint of green in the skin tones, but also at the same time it's balanced really well and the contrast is pretty good. Colors pop and are really vibrant. And then we look at the LG at the bottom. The LG is just kind of on another level, obviously, because of the pixel level illumination. So we're able to notice things like those tight highlights behind the main subject here, and we can even see in the hair that there's a lot more of that catch light that you're going to find in the environment, or rather, it's technically called a rim light that you can find on her hair. And then, of course, there's catch lights in her eyes, and then you can see all of the little practical lighting in the background. And it really just has more three-dimensionality to it. And that's the thing. The OLED is going to exhibit way more three-dimensionality. Take this image, for example. It's going to be more of the same. You can notice a nice, strong, contrasty pop for her jawline, where the budget TV doesn't really have that. So in my initial impressions video during the unboxing process, I told you that it's going to come down to processing. And this is what I'm talking about. If you look at her necklace, you'll notice that the blue is not only a more vibrant shade of cyan, but a more accurate one as well. We can notice the same thing in the red, in her lipstick, and also in the purple underneath the necklace of her dress. These are little nuanced details that many people might not notice, but it's something that when we're doing pixel peeping comparisons like this, it's important to note. Now, when we look at images like this, it gets a little bit harder to tell, but only a little bit harder to tell the difference between the two. And I think this is a testament to TCL this year, because not only are they keeping up with an LG OLED in terms of initial shock and awe, what you can see when you look at the picture, but they're holding their own pretty well. I mean, usually you'd be able to immediately identify which one's the OLED and which one is the QLED, and this is making it a lot harder. And I think this is really cool, because now we're seeing budget TVs approach monster tier, and you're still not paying more than $500 for these TVs, which is incredible. So the color looks good, the clarity looks good at the TCL at the top, black levels are uniform, no issues whatsoever. And again, everything just kind of looks really good. Of course, the OLED is going to win when we talk about clarity and contrast details that we are seeing. The processing chip is way better and the colors are better, but ultimately the TCL not too far behind. Now, when we look at this image, now things kind of take a little bit more of a shift, and we're going to see a little bit more of what I was talking about with processing. So notice how the leading lines of the hedges, as you can see, are just straight contrast. You can see them almost like staircases on the LG C1 at the bottom. You can see the foliage. Each individual strand of grass and brush is separated, where on the TCL, it's more blurred out and kind of blurred together. This is the difference between a high-end TV and a budget TV in 2021. Also, the building in the background. You're going to notice way more contrast detail in the things like the columns and every little window back there. The structure overall is just more clear, and the clarity really is your big benefit for paying the extra money. So for some people, maybe that might not be a big deal for you. Maybe you might look at the picture at the top at the TCL and say, you know what, it's good enough. The colors look all right. I don't have a problem with it. That's probably my TV to go with. Of course, you're going to notice more vibrant pink in her dress. You're going to notice that the crystals on her dress are going to be more shiny, and they're going to have more colors in the crystals themselves. And these are the little differences that you're going to pick out when, again, doing these kinds of comparisons. And again, just to give you another example of just how different the contrast can look in scene to scene, I mean, it's day and night for what you're getting. And I really obviously prefer the look of the C1 at the bottom because of the just sheer amount of three-dimensionality that you're getting out of this. And it's really just incredible to see. But not to say that the TCL is doing bad, because they definitely aren't, as you guys clearly see. It's doing okay, but this is where it's starting to become a lot more disparaging. So when you have brighter scenes like this, where there's a lot of geometry going on, you're going to notice that this is a budget TV a lot more, the TCL to be very specific, versus something more high-end like the LG C1. Now, looking at this image, things kind of shift again, and it gets really weird. So at first glance, they look very similar. And honestly speaking, again, this is a testament to TCL really delivering a high-end picture quality for not a lot of money. But when you really start being a pixel peeper, you're going to notice things like the yellow is just way more pronounced. The reflections in the Lamborghini way more pronounced. The details, the contrast inside of the taillights more detailed on the LG C1. The dress is going to have more detail. You're going to see every little like shadow that falls naturally in the curves of the dress. You're going to notice every little thing about highlights and the way it's kind of wrapping around the environment and the clouds in the background. And you're going to see the stark contrast difference between the rocks. These are the little fine things that people go to OLED for. Fine little detail things, to be specific. Then, of course, at the TCL level, it's not bad at all, though. The image, upon first glance, does look very similar, and they do boast some pretty decent gains in terms of, again, just having a brighter image overall. It is brighter, but it isn't necessarily better, and I think that's something that is worth noting. But again, it's holding its own better than I ever thought it would. I honestly expected this to be a downright slaughter, and to see it be so similar, it's really actually impressive. Now, this is where it got shocking for me. The black levels are damn identical. There was zero bloom on the TCL in this scene, and my hero, I think it's two heroes. No, Hero Rising is what it is. And this scene was just incredible. I didn't notice any blooming, haloing, clouding, flashlighting, edge leaking, none of that budget buyer crap. And I think this is where TCL really showed up this year. The black levels are insane, and you're seeing it go up against an OLED, and you're seeing it in real time. Now, I was very particular when I took these images. I made sure that each image was taken in a similar lighting environment, and I made sure that both had literally their metering exposed correctly for this display. So the image you're seeing is basically as undegraded as it's going to get. See, the problem when I do like the side-by-side comparisons and I run both TVs at the same time, sometimes the camera tries to meter for one TV, but then another gets too bright. This, you're seeing both perfectly exposed with neither one blowing out. And as you can clearly see, it is incredible, and I absolutely love this. The contrast is there on the TCL. The colors are there on the TCL. Yes, the C1 does have better greens, I'm noticing, but overall, TCL is not falling very far behind, and I would say this is definitely a tie right here, which is incredible because we are talking about an OLED, ladies and gentlemen. TCL is tying with an OLED with their 5 series that is literally $500, and that blew my mind. Now, obviously, things shift again once you get to more bright images like this. Oddly enough, the TCL you would have expected to have the advantage, but obviously it doesn't because the colors are a little bit more muted now as we look at the comparison between the two, and the OLED is looking a lot better. Now, to be completely fair, I didn't stop the movie at the same exact moment on both displays. There is a little bit of lightning going on, which does create more color, so of course it's not as fair, but I still can think that you would be able to see a lot more of the similarities in this image than not. So, yeah, obviously the reds, the greens, all of it pop more. Bakugo's strap on his uniform, Deku's green uniform. I actually, believe it or not, prefer the greens at the top a lot more than on the C1, but at the same token, I still prefer the overall look of the C1, if that makes sense. Though TCL isn't doing too bad because if you look at the brick, you actually have more detail in the brick and in the foliage in the background than you do on the C1, so that's really weird. It's one of those give and take kind of scenarios. So, you know, not too terrible, but I still prefer the C1 for this. Now, looking at this image, this is where, again, at first glance, very similar, but then you got to really hone in with your eye. And I noticed that the skin tones just generally have this really green pale look to them, and it's not really as appealing as I would have hoped it to be. So then we look at the bottom. Of course, we have all the colors, contrast. Each line from the power is being outlined, and you're able to just see it a lot better. And you're able to see like little nuanced contrast details within the red and the blue sections of their power attack that they're getting ready to unleash on this villain. Now, again, these are very, 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 very nitpicking details that not everybody is going to do in the course of a movie. So again, the TCL might be fine for you, but again, I just want to illustrate the differences between a higher end TV and something like the 5 series. Now, moving on to this image, we can notice that this is where you're going to see a difference in tonality between WRGB and a regular RGB. So when things are mostly white, this is where the WRGB technology tends to struggle a bit. Now, it's greatly improved with the C1, but also, it's not going to totally beat out the advantages. And what I want to point your attention to is look at Deku's eyes. If you look at the character's eyes, you'll notice there's more blue at the bottom when we start talking about the LGC1. That is absolutely something you are going to notice compared to the TCL at the top, which is using a true RGB panel. You're not having any of this degradation from the WRGB, so again, it's just RGB. Again, overall, I do prefer the look of the LGC1 overall, but I do think that for this particular case and example, this is where TCL, in my personal opinion, did tend to edge out the LGC1 a bit. Now, if we look at this image, I also prefer the look of the TCL at the top because I prefer the colors and the way they pop, the way they look, the reds. I think the brightness factor was also really good for this particular scene where, again, on the C1, I just didn't have that same level of shock and awe from QLED. But also at the same token, it's not doing bad either. There's contrast on the C1 and it looks wonderful, but it's not as bright, and it's something to note that when you're in the brighter scenes, you are going to maybe prefer a little bit more kick, and that's where the other TV is going to give you the edge. So I say the LG did good, but the TCL 5 series definitely takes the cake for this one. Looking at this image, it goes to the LGC1 all day, every day. So when we have bright elements on a mostly black canvas, that's where LG OLED shines the best. And this demo is obviously an LG OLED demo, so of course it favorites them, and it's maybe not the most fair thing to use, but we're going to use it anyway because I love it. So looking at the color and the contrast of that big practical light in the background, we're able to see just how beautiful it is. But the big thing here to note, the difference between processing chipsets, is look at the ambient light, the red light bouncing off of his skin, making him look kind of cartoonish, as people would say. That's ambient light coming from his environment, and you just don't have as much on the TCL at the top. And again, that's one of the biggest downsides to going with a more budget-friendly option. You are going to lose a bit more in the way of the color gamut coverage that you are going to have, and I think that's something that you should note here. All in all, though, I think it does look pretty good. Looking at this image, again, comparing to an OLED, black levels are almost identical now. Not quite fully identical, but I will point out they gained something that OLED doesn't have. So notice how if you look at all the smoke and fog in the background on the LGC1, you can see a little bit of it kind of right behind her back. You can kind of see a little bit of it, but if you look dead center to the left, you can definitely see that that like near black color is a lot better on the TCL at the top because it's not pixel level illumination, so it's not trying to dim down things that it thinks are near black. And I think this is one of the kind of perfect examples of like why people choose QLEDs over OLED. I completely get it because sometimes near black is going to be a problem. And you're seeing it in things like the grayish colors. So that's something to think about in scenes with a lot of fog and things like that. But overall, when you look at the jacket and you look at the bike, it's illuminated perfectly. And then the C1 starts slaughtering easily the TCL at the top, giving a lot more color, a lot more clarity, all the stuff we talked about before. So again, I think that's very good stuff. So moving on to this image, we can then see another shift in terms of color quality. The TCL at the top has this kind of like pukey green to it that could not be calibrated out, unfortunately, where that's not a problem here on the LGC1. So again, big differences in color. You're going to notice that. As far as clarity goes, I'd say they're very similar. And if you were going just off of a clarity perspective, it'd be kind of difficult to notice, but then you can find little things that you can pick out, like the highlight on the right side of the screen that you can notice on her face, a lot more pronounced on the LG C1. You can notice things like the glitter being more shiny at the TCL level on the top. So there are little differences that you can, of course, pick out here. Her ears being more crisp on the LG C1. So again, it's a back and forth kind of contest, but the color differences are going to be the most readily available thing that you're going to notice. And of course, clarity. So moving on to this image, you're going to see more of the same. It's kind of like a generally green, pukey kind of color. And again, I can't stress enough, there are a lot of budget buyer TVs that do offer this kind of tinting to the screen. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a type of VA panel that they produce at a lower level or what, but it is something that I've noticed time and time again. If you're buying a TV that's about $500, there's going to be a lot of green in that screen. So that's something that the LG C1 doesn't suffer with. So, say la vie there. Counteractively, though, I do notice that highlights do look a little bit more blue in comparison, but then again, the highlights kind of look green on the budget TV, so it is, again, a bit of a dance here. Now, again, another shocking image when we look at the TCL 5 series. At the top, it is identical to the LG C1 at the bottom. Black levels are not playing around, guys. I'm telling you, they came to slay the competition, and they are doing it with this TCL 5 series. I'm sorry, but Hisense doesn't have a prayer in the world when you start looking at the black levels and the color and the motion coming off of this TV for $500. It's just not happening for any other brand this year. This is pound for pound, dollar for dollar, absolutely the best budget TV I have seen this year. I mean, I've never seen anybody step up to an OLED like this and slap so close to their level. No, they don't exactly hit at the level, because you can look and you can notice things like, obviously it's a perfect canvas, so it's more three-dimensional. Look at the flower, you'll notice the highlights are better. But for the most part, almost everything that you would want out of an OLED is here. And that is huge, because now you're noticing that you don't necessarily have to spend the extra money to go to OLED, and that's going to save people a lot of time. Again, the big differences, though, are colors. So as you look at this image, you're going to notice that on the LG C1, you have every variation of blue, where it's a lot more restricted on the TCL, as you guys are clearly seeing here. You're not having all these various shades of blue that makes up this one image. So that's something that I noticed. And I did also notice there was a bit more banding, oddly enough, on the C1 than what existed on the TCL. So the gradations for this particular scene were managed a bit better. Though I did notice that there was a little bit in the way of dirty screen effect on this particular image on the TCL at the top. So it's a weird little back and forth. Now, you might see some lines on the C1 kind of wrapping around the fish. That's actually not there. That's moire. It's just my lens that's kind of really super sharp, and yeah, it just happened. It's just what happens when you overly focus on something, but it was kind of nothing I could do to kind of fix that. But either way, you guys are seeing what I'm talking about. Now, moving on to the next image, I think that this is where I kind of got a little conflicted. I like the clarity, I like the overall color, and I like the contrast on the C1 at the bottom. However, the skin tones at the top are way better, in my personal opinion, on the TCL, and literally just the skin tones. That's literally what they brought to the party. I can maybe make an argument for the green inside of the wine glass and the green on the lipstick maybe. The gold on the earrings I do like better on the TCL as well, and the green on the hat. But the green on the jacket or the shirt she's wearing, dress, whatever it is, maybe not so much. I don't know, man. I feel like this is one of those images that if you pick apart, you can find a lot of flaws. But overall, the clearly more aesthetically pleasing one is going to be the LG C1. It grabs your attention more with those bright popping highlights. It grabs your attention more with those vibrant colors, and it just looks a lot more like what they were going for. Though, again, TCL not really doing a bad job here. Now, when we look at this image, however, this is where I would love to end the video on by just kind of pointing out that this is the biggest advantage of a QLED. Everything pops, everything is vibrant, and that's the glory of QLED. And then looking at the skin tones, I prefer them a lot more versus what I'm getting on the C1 here. So to be very clear, And this is where this whole thing becomes very fun for me. On the TCL, I'm not really doing anything too dramatic outside of using native color space. On the LGC1, I'm using a special HDMI signaling override menu to be able to force BT 2020. So all of these images that you saw where TCL was competing against this OLED were in BT 2020. Had I put it in Rec 709, the LG C1 would have lost dramatically in terms of color. And that, my friends, is the biggest statement I think I can make this year because it's true. And it's so wonderful to see these budget TVs hitting at a level that you never ever expected them to hit. So unless you're going to do what I do, enforce BT 2020 color on SDR content, and you're going to then go in and optimize for that and make adjustments and changes, you are never going to see this level of color and quality out of the LGC1. And the reality is the TCL at the top will win every day of the week if you're comparing it with Rec 709 content. Now, I could do a comparison and show that off, but I promise you the comment section would be filled with very angry LGC1 owners saying, I either don't know what I'm doing, I'm a clown, I was paid by TCL, or all the various things when their favorite TV loses. I will be very real with you and tell you I love the C1. It is the best TV in 2021. But if you're using it default, it is not going to win very many things. And that's just as real as anyone can tell you. Now, for both these TVs, I do have settings available. If you want to get the looks that I'm rocking on these TVs, contact me, hit me up down below, and I'll shoot you over the membership link so you can get the settings. But overall, this is basically the comparison. I'm very impressed with the TCL. They did way better than I thought they'd do. And for this particular image, I definitely give the edge to the TCL. But that being said, I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty. And until the next video, I'll see you guys later.